So when you think about mastering really high-level communication, like whether you're prepping for a major academic defense or writing a research grant, or even just stepping into a corporate boardroom for the first time.
Right, the stakes feel incredibly high.
Exactly. And because the stakes are high, there's this overwhelming expectation that you need to use massive, multisyllabic, Latin-based
Oh,
words.
absolutely, the classic trap.
Right. Like if you're not saying utilize instead of use or facilitate instead of help, it feels like you're somehow, I don't know, failing to command the room.
Yeah, it's such a common trap, honestly.
Mhm.
People just assume that sounding authoritative requires sounding like a walking thesaurus.
Mm.
But what actually happens is you end up with these incredibly dense, impenetrable sentences. They might look impressive on paper, sure, but in spoken discourse, they just distance you from your audience.
Yeah, it feels really stiff.
Exactly. The most persuasive communicators don't build walls with their vocabulary, They build bridges.
I love that. Building bridges. And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive into the sources today. We're going to decode a very specific quirk of the English language that builds those exact bridges.
A quirk that consistently trips up even the most advanced speakers, I might add.
Oh, 100%. Especially when they're trying to hit that really precise C1 academic or professional tone. We are talking about phrasal verbs.
Yes. Phrasal verbs.
Because on the surface, they feel so casual, right? Like everyday slang. They sound like something you'd use while just chatting with a friend at a coffee shop.
Right, but in reality, they are the secret glue of persuasive discourse.
Exactly. They take these complex, rigid ideas and just make them incredibly dynamic.
Mastering these 2- or 3-word combinations is, it's the definitive bridge between sounding like a stiff, rigid textbook and sounding like a fluent, authoritative thought leader.
Yeah, the contrast is wild.
In high-level contexts, these verbs are doing massive heavy lifting. They provide psychological nuance, they soften harsh realities, and they add, actual motion to static concepts in a way that a single-word Latin verb simply cannot match.
So to really understand this, we're going to trace the entire life cycle of an idea today. We're looking at 15 essential phrasal verbs, and we're tracking how they describe the journey of a project.
From the very beginning to the end.
Right, from the initial spark of research to building a structural framework, facing the inevitable friction of reality, dealing with failure, and ultimately looking to the horizon.
It's a full narrative arc.
It really is. So imagine you're launching a massive endeavor. Phase 1 is always the foundation of inquiry, right? You have to start by gathering facts.
Yeah, the first phase of any serious pursuit is investigation. And in a high-level environment, you don't just, do a comprehensive analysis of decadal fiscal trends.
Right, that sounds too basic.
Exactly. You carry out that analysis. To perform, complete, or execute a task. Think of a mandated laboratory carrying out extensive clinical trials before a new vaccine is authorized for public distribution.
Oh, that's a great example from the sources.
Or a specialized operational team carrying out a mission with surgical precision.
Let's actually look at the nuance there, because why wouldn't you just say execute a clinical trial?
It's a subtle difference, but an important one.
Right, because if you're in a boardroom, execute can sound almost militant or just overly abrupt. It implies a single flick of a switch.
Yeah, carry out is much better there.
Because it implies carrying a burden from point A to point B, it suggests a sustained procedural journey, you're shouldering the weight of the research. It adds a physical dimension to a purely intellectual task.
And that physical dimension is absolutely crucial for making abstract work feel tangible to stakeholders.
Definitely.
But closely related to that deliberate action is the investigative step itself. When a complex issue arises, you don't always want to formally investigate it.
That's a heavy word.
It is. Instead, you look into it. For instance, a legal department might need to look into the potential regulatory implications of a deal before they finalize a major corporate merger.
Or, like the sources mention, authorities looking into whether environmental degradation was exacerbated by industrial negligence.
Exactly.
The psychology of look into is just fascinating to me, because if a CEO stands up and says, we are investigating the allegations of systemic corruption.
Oh, panic ensues.
Right. It immediately sounds like a crisis. It sounds like subpoenas are flying everywhere. But if they say a committee has been established to look into the allegations, it completely lowers the temperature in the room.
It sounds like harmless, diligent curiosity.
Exactly. It's basically a political maneuver hidden inside a phrasal verb.
Which is brilliant. It softens the blow while still maintaining accountability. But, research isn't just about what you deliberately carry out or look into.
Right, there's the unexpected stuff.
Yeah, the element of serendipity. Finding something purely by chance, which brings the verb come across right into your professional toolkit.
Like, stumble onto something.
Precisely.
Hmm?
A researcher delving into university archives might just happen to come across a series of unpublished manuscripts that changes their entire thesis.
Or an art historian coming across an intricate fusion of classical aesthetics and modern architectural principles in some undocumented building. It's that happy accident.
Yeah.
So carry out and look into are like your magnifying glass and your scalpel, very intentional tools, but come across as the flash of inspiration you didn't plan for.
That's a great way to put it. But there is a secondary layer to come across that our sources highlight, and it involves interpersonal dynamics.
Oh, right. The impression someone lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We see this constantly in professional evaluations. A colleague might come across as slightly aloof in meetings, but that initial demeanor actually masks a profound intellectual curiosity.
Which is so common in academia, right?
Absolutely. Academic and corporate tones frequently require us to acknowledge that initial impressions, how data or how people come across, are really merely starting points.
Yeah, what comes across at first glance almost always requires deeper looking into before any final actions are carried out. The progression is basically built right into the vocabulary.
It really is.
Okay, so you've gathered your facts, you've looked into the anomalies, you've come across some surprising data. Now we enter phase 2, constructing frameworks and narratives. You have to build a home for all this raw data.
This is the architectural phase. It relies heavily on the concept of establishing or arranging things. You set up a system.
Like entrepreneurs aiming to set up a decentralized network to bypass traditional financial intermediaries.
Yes. Or a multinational corporation setting up a robust framework to facilitate seamless communication between its international branches.
Again, we have to stop and ask why we use setup here instead of a word like create or invent.
Tone is everything.
Right, because if you tell your investors you created a framework, it sounds a bit like, I don't know, an art project. It sounds delicate.
Or almost fictional.
Exactly. But setting up a framework implies scaffolding. It implies engineering, utility, and permanence.
Though it's worth noting, our sources point out it can have a highly malicious application in legal contexts, too.
Oh, the framing aspect.
Yeah, you might be falsely accused of trying to set up a rival company using proprietary information stolen from a former employer.
Right, so it works both ways. But regardless of the intent, once you set up a framework, you must define its internal composition. You have to articulate what is actually inside the structure.
And in high-level discourse, we use makeup to denote that statistical composition or demographic reality, to constitute or form a whole.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Minorities and marginalized groups might make up a significant portion of the demographic most affected by specific urban policy changes.
Okay, I have to push back on makeup slightly here.
Oh, why is that?
Well, because for a lot of learners, it instinctively sounds quite childish. Like if you hear makeup, you usually think of a child making up an excuse for forgetting their homework or making up a fantasy game.
Right, it feels deceptive.
Yeah. So bringing that into a C1 academic paper about demographics feels almost counterintuitive.
I completely see your point.
Mm-hmm.
And that deceptive meaning certainly still exists in formal contexts, particularly in legal scenarios, like witnesses being accused of trying to make up a narrative to exonerate a primary suspect.
Right. Perjury, basically.
Exactly.
Right.
But the compositional meaning elevates the verb entirely. When you say variable X makes up 40% of the data set, you're building the puzzle.
Ah, I see.
It also functions as a concept of compensation. A candidate might make up for a lack of practical industry experience with an unparalleled level of theoretical knowledge. They are literally filling a void to make the whole complete.
That makes perfect sense. So you set up the boundaries and the demographics make up the interior. But no idea, no project, and certainly no demographic exists in a historical vacuum. Everything has a lineage. Normally, if someone says take after, you think of genetics, like a son takes after his mother's height.
But in high-level discourse, we use it for intellectual and operational lineage.
Like younger generations being influenced by older ones.
Yes. A younger generation of poets might take after the Romantics in their deep preoccupation with nature. Or certain modern artistic movements take after their predecessors while simultaneously attempting to rebel against them.
It applies to the corporate world too, right?
Definitely. It applies to operational skills as well, such as a young executive taking after her renowned mentor in her analytical prowess during intense negotiations.
So building an idea is really an evolutionary process. You set up a new framework, but it's made up of existing historical data, and it inevitably takes after the theories and paradigms that came before it.
You're weaving your new idea into the established tapestry of your field.
Beautifully said. But, and here's where the life cycle gets really difficult, we have to enter phase 3, facing the friction.
The dreaded phase 3.
Right. You've
Yeah.
built this beautiful, historically lineaged framework, but reality always introduces entropy. Things start to degrade.
Every ambitious project hits a wall of friction eventually. And the first indicator is usually depletion. You run out of resources.
Just completely finishing a supply of something until there is absolutely nothing left.
Right. On a macro scale, if we continue our current rate of consumption, we will inevitably run out of non-renewable resources within a generation.
But the abstract applications of run out of are even more common in the boredom, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Imagine you're locked in mediation. Negotiations are dragging on for weeks, and both parties are running out of patience and their willingness to compromise.
Or an academic author running out of creative steam toward the end of a massive trilogy, resulting in a lackluster finale. Running out of is just a terrifying passive experience.
Because it's happening to you.
Exactly. You are losing control.
Which forces an immediate active response if you want your project to survive. You have to cut down on consumption. To actively reduce the amount of something.
Like medical professionals strongly advising patients to cut down on processed sugars to mitigate the risk of cardiovascular disease.
Right. Or corporations implementing aggressive strategies to cut down on carbon emissions in response to stringent international regulations.
Or even just looking at a quarterly spreadsheet. You must cut down on superfluous expenditures if you intend to maintain a healthy profit margin.
Yes. You run out of resources passively, but you cut down on waste actively as a survival mechanism.
It's all about regaining control. But sometimes, despite all your triage, the system just fails. Things break down.
Stopping functioning entirely. If a primary cooling system were to break down, an entire server room faces the risk of catastrophic hardware failure.
And it applies to human systems, too.
Absolutely. Interpersonal communication begins to break down when there's a systemic lack of transparency between executive departments.
Wait, there's a really fascinating paradox here with breakdown in academic English.
What do you mean?
Well, we have the negative meaning, the catastrophic failure you just described, but we also use it as our primary analytical tool.
Oh, to break something down by dividing it into smaller parts.
Right. We say we must break down complex socioeconomic variables to understand the underlying causes of an urban crisis. So, in high-level thinking, breaking a problem down analytically is precisely how you prevent a physical or systemic breakdown.
The analytical breakdown is literally the antidote to the systemic breakdown. I love that. You dismantle the monster to see how it ticks before it can dismantle your project.
Exactly. This entire phase of friction is just a push and pull between passive entropy and active mitigation.
And if you fail to actively mitigate that friction, you end up relying on delay tactics. You put off the inevitable.
Postponing, like a board of directors deciding to put off inevitable corporate restructuring until market volatility subsides.
Right. And our sources explicitly warn against this, noting that one should never put off the acquisition of essential skills because the window of opportunity in a fast-paced market may close abruptly.
It's so risky. And the psychological cost of delay introduces the secondary meaning of put off, which is to discourage or alienate someone.
Yes, potential investors will quickly be put off by a company's lack of transparency regarding long-term liabilities.
If you put off a difficult decision, you basically end up putting off your stakeholders. You alienate the very people you need to survive the friction.
Which brings us to the final act of our life cycle. Phase 4, resolution, resilience, refusal, and the horizon.
The friction has reached a breaking point. Your project either collapses entirely or you are forced to make incredibly hard choices.
Let's examine the collapse first. When plans, deals, or meticulous arrangements simply fail to materialize, they fall through.
Like a multi-million-dollar real estate deal. The ink is almost dry, but it begins to fall through the moment investors scrutinize the hidden liabilities you tried to put off.
Or meticulous preparations for an international summit fall through due to unforeseen diplomatic tensions.
Or a multi-year research project is forced into an indefinite hiatus because government funding falls through. Notice the passive gravity of the phrase there. It literally drops out of your hands and falls through the floor. You have absolutely no control.
But our next verb, turn down, is the exact opposite. It's an exertion of total control.
To reject or refuse an offer. Now, turn down and our subsequent verb, give up, often carry negative connotations of defeat for English learners.
They do, yeah.
But in a C1 context, they frequently represent immense power and agency. Consider a candidate who feels compelled to turn down a highly lucrative job offer because the company's practices are fundamentally incompatible with her ethical value.
That is an absolute assertion of principles.
Yes. And contrast turn down with reject. If you tell your network, I rejected their job offer, it sounds so hostile. It sounds like you slammed the door in their face.
Yeah, a bit too aggressive for professional settings.
Right. But if you say, I had to turn down the offer, it sounds like you thoughtfully evaluated it, lowered the volume on it, and politely walked away, preserving the relationship.
It's an active diplomatic exercise of authority. Even a municipal council turning down a zoning proposal is exercising their mandate.
And that same agency applies to give up. Yeah. To stop making an effort, or to quit a deeply held habit or belief.
It is rarely about surrendering to failure in these high-level contexts. It's about strategic relinquishment.
Exactly.
Like to achieve a state of true mindfulness in psychological studies, one must often give up the need to constantly judge internal experiences. Giving up a toxic paradigm is a victory, not a defeat.
Then you have the sheer stubbornness of refusing to give up. Theoretical physicists unwilling to give up the search for a unified theory, despite decades of immense mathematical challenges.
Or a seasoned executive refusing to give up a board seat, asserting that his historical knowledge is vital during a volatile company transition.
High-level professional discourse is not a highlight reel of constant success. It's a vocabulary of resilience.
That's very true.
It's about how you articulate the things that fall through out of your control. How you make principled choices to turn down misaligned paths, knowing when to strategically give up outdated methods and when to refuse to give up your core mission.
And once you navigate that crucible, you enter the aftermath. You have to get over the shock.
Recovering from an illness, a financial loss, or a profound professional setback.
Like a regional economy taking several months or even years to get over the shock of a sudden banking sector collapse.
Or an academic struggling for months to get over the acute disappointment of her multi-year research proposal being rejected by a prestigious grant foundation.
Getting over something isn't just about emotional resilience, though. It's a mechanical process of adaptation.
What do you mean?
Think of how once you get over the initial steep learning curve, a highly complex piece of new software suddenly becomes remarkably intuitive for your daily professional use.
Oh, I see. You scale the wall, you get over the obstacle, and suddenly the view opens up.
Which perfectly positions us for our final verb. Once you get over the shock of failure or the friction of the learning curve, you are finally in a position to look forward to the horizon.
To anticipate the future with pleasure and professional excitement.
Yes, macroeconomists looking forward to a period of relative market stability after the implementation of new monetary policies.
Or university faculties looking forward to welcoming a highly diverse cohort of students who will completely challenge and elevate existing academic paradigms.
But balancing that forward momentum with critical vigilance is key. While we look forward to the unprecedented technological advancements of the coming decade, we must remain vigilant regarding their societal implications.
You anticipate the future, but you do not blindly trust it.
Exactly.
If you zoom out and look at the territory we just covered, we didn't just review a random list of advanced vocabulary words today. We actually traced the entire anatomical structure of human endeavor.
These 15 phrasal verbs really do constitute the precise toolkit required to articulate the life cycle of any high-level project.
They do.
They allow you to discuss the spark of discovery, the architecture of a new system, the brutal friction of reality, the dignity of failure, and the strategy of future progress, all with incredible nuance.
They are the dynamic engines of your sentences, because without them, you're basically just pointing at a spreadsheet of a failed quarter and saying, we failed.
Which doesn't help anyone.
Right. But with them, you're explaining exactly how the negotiations fell through, how you were cutting down on waste to make up for the losses, and what the recovery is going to look like moving forward. They transform you from a passive observer of facts into an active, commanding narrator of ideas.
It's empowering.
It really is. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on. Something hiding in plain sight within the very structure of these words.
Oh.
Look closely at the second half of every single verb we discussed today. Out, into, across, up, down, through, forward.
Wait. Every single one relies entirely on a physical, spatial direction.
Exactly. We anchor our highest, most abstract intellectual concepts to the physical movement of the human body through space.
That is wild.
Right. Think about how these spatial metaphors subconsciously dictate the way we view success, effort, and failure. When we gather facts, we look into. When we build a company, we set up. When we reduce our budget, we cut down. When our deals fail, they fall through. And when we anticipate the future, we look forward.
Do we literally visualize academic and corporate progress as moving physically forward on a geometric timeline? Do we visualize analytical thinking as physically digging down into the earth?
It forces you to wonder how much our physical gravity shapes our corporate philosophy.
It really does.
If our language for high-level thinking is completely shackled to our bodily movement through physical space, what happens if you try to change the direction?
Something to think about.
Let that change the way you conceptualize your next big idea.